Welcome to the Streets.mn podcast, the show where we highlight how transportation and land use can make our communities better places. Coming to you from beautiful Seward, Minneapolis, Minnesota, I am your host, Ian R. Buck. The Minnesota State Legislative Session is upon us, and exciting things are afoot. Building on the momentum from last year's historic session, many urbanist organizations are working on legislation to push forward for this year. In this episode, we'll hear about housing and land use in the first half, and then jump into transportation in the second half. Let's dive right in. So here we are, going to chat with a couple of volunteers with Neighbors for More Neighbors, Katie Jones and Yvan Roberts. Neighbors for More Neighbors is an organization that traditionally has been doing a lot of advocacy work around abundant housing in Minneapolis and has been targeting, city level policy stuff. And this year, last summer, Neighbors for More Neighbors started hosting these summer camps to get the group of volunteers who's used to working with Neighbors for More Neighbors thinking about state level policy. And that got me really excited. So I'm curious to hear what Neighbors for More Neighbors is up to, what the priorities are going to be, and I hear that there's a broader coalition that we're working with as well. So Katie and Yvan, take it away. Tell us about what you got.
I'll let Yvan say more about the summer camp programming, but I recently joined in October and been really involved in the coalition building piece, and just knowing that Neighbors for More Neighbors, we've just been pushing for more housing, and with the 2040 issue happening in Minneapolis, I was really motivated to want to also work at the state level, and having gone through one legislative session, I felt like that was some experience that I could help bring to the coalition, or to Neighbors for More Neighbors, and help to build a coalition around this.
Yeah, so just to build on what Katie said, I mean, as you noted in the introduction, Neighbors for More Neighbors was founded and has sort of been working in Minneapolis to support the 2040 reforms and to sort of push the city to do a good job of those. And so there was a lot of energy and action and good work happening at the city level, and so that was an appropriate place to focus. The move into sort of state work came about for sort of several reasons. One was sort of a specific frustration that we found when we were engaged with the city in early 2023 on the sort of their built form standards in mixed use areas, and it was specifically around how much of a setback, how far from the adjacent properties from the street did 4 to 6 story buildings have to be. And if you dig into that, it turns out that the reason that they have to be a long way from their neighbors and a long way from the street in a lot of cases is the sort of concern with shadows and sort of visual impact. Why is that? Well, it's because in America, we anything that's 4 stories or bigger, you have to have 2 sets of staircases that are accessible. Long and the short of it is that this leads to the kinds of buildings we're familiar with, which is anything that's 4 stories or over is a pretty bulky building. And I think a lot of people have seen these around town, these sort of 6 stories, 7 stories, but also anything that's sort of 4 stories. And so it's pretty bulky. And the city rules are really responding to that. Now, why do we have this rule about double staircase? It turns out that it's a building code requirement. It's only in the United States and Canada. And so if you want to do something about this local issue, like how far back does a building have to be from its neighbors, you have to deal with something at the state level. So we were sort of motivated from that to sort of address that issue. The other sort of piece of moving into state work is a lot of the people who are involved in Neighbors for More Neighbors. We care about homes for everybody and not just in Minneapolis. And it's become pretty clear over the last few years Minneapolis 2040 was a really sort of pioneering change in zoning policy within the United States, with the allowing triplexes around the city. But over the last few years, there's a lot of ways in which it's been eclipsed by work in other states. And increasingly that has been done at the state level. Just sort of the dynamic of how the sort of the politics works might be a little better to deal with, where you can think of like everyone in the state deserves a good home, and you're not dealing with these sort of picayune issues of particular neighborhoods. And my neighborhood, you can talk about it as a housing issue, as an issue related to climate change, about sort of giving options to families for building different types of housing. And so for the sort of very specific reason, this building code issue, but also sort of broader strategic political reasons, sort of pushed us to learn more about how to work at the state level, and then to sort of now to start doing it with other organizations.
Nice. Okay, so what I'm hearing so far is single access staircases.
Yep.
For the building code, upzoning like statewide as a kind of a general goal. Are there specific like benchmarks that we're going for in there?
Yeah, we've got what we're calling missing middle as kind of our bill package, and we have like the specifics are being worked out, even though we're not even in legislative session right now. We'd like for it to go up to as many units as possible, and I think we're learning along the way which legislators are comfortable with certain numbers. But yeah, generally the goal would be upzoning statewide for a missing middle bill. Right.
And I guess when we say statewide, it is worth noting, I think, that we're just talking about within municipalities, like in unincorporated land that's just like under the jurisdiction of a county. We wouldn't be targeting that, right?
Yeah, and I mean most of the sort of the housing crunch is mostly in the metro area. That's where most of the state's population lives, and then it's in cities. The sort of greater Minnesota cities. Rochester has a particular housing issue related to migration and work around Mayo, the sort of seasonal housing pressures up in the sort of Northern Lakes district. Duluth has its own particular issues, but as sort of dealing with things which are in townships and cities, municipalities, gets you a lot of the way to dealing with a lot of the housing issues around the state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we brought up like 2040 a couple of times, mostly like historically, that this is where Neighbors for More Neighbors like came from. But 2040 is in a weird place right now, with the lawsuits going on around that, environmental reviews, etc. Do we have any goals about like establishing, precedents at the state level that like comprehensive plans do not have to go through environmental reviews?
That is in some ways we're treating that as a separate issue. The environmental groups have sort of different perspectives on this, and so one of the sort of the key things is that the lawsuit came about under the sort of Minnesota Environmental Rights Act. I think I've got the terminology there right. And so that gives every Minnesotan a right to sort of sue about environmental issues. Is comprehensive planning like something that is litigable under that? That's the sort of the key question. Is it like building a specific project, or is it a distinct piece of policy making? And so the environmental groups have used those tools of litigating under that legislation for a long time to stop genuinely bad things. And so, yeah, there's a genuine and real degree of attachment to that as a tool. I think we're seeing sort of the dangers of seeing policy making as something that you can litigate, and so trying to set that aside. Minneapolis 2040 wasn't perfect, but it was developed in a sort of a very democratic, inclusive way with a significant amount of public engagement. Staff, elected officials, etc., weighed up a lot of different competing things. Or you could have a single judge respond to a lawsuit. It seems that policy is best done in the sort of messy democratic way of having a lot of different people weigh in, rather than giving people who didn't win that the opportunity to deal with a single judge and their predilections and sort of particular viewpoints.
Yeah.
So there is that legislation is being developed sort of by and the environmental groups are weighing in on that.
Okay. And but that's not something that Neighbors for More Neighbors is directly pursuing.
It is one of our legislative priorities, but we're working in coalition.
Gotcha. Nice. So yeah, let's talk about those coalitions. It sounds like we've got a couple of different groups that are working at different angles. Tell me about some of the other orgs that we're working with.
Yeah, so we initially were talking with groups like Sierra Club and Move Minnesota, and since have also included Isaiah, Minnesota Housing Partnership, SEIU, Sustain St. Paul. I think I've gotten everyone there.
Nice.
So yeah, we've got a pretty big coalition, and honestly a pretty diverse coalition in terms of like what the foci are. Some more transportation focused organizations, environmental organizations, union, more housing focused. And I think what's been really clear when we've had some values discussions is really just like the focus needing to be that there is insufficient housing, and that's a problem when it comes to just human dignity, equity. Having people living in dignified housing is better for the environment than not. And so, and living closer together and in more urban areas is also a good thing. Preserving our farmland, conserving our natural lands. So all of those things have been kind of coalescing. I'll also mention, just homes for workers is also a really important thing, and making sure that homes are affordable. All of these things, it's been very clear that, our groups are very aligned on those. And so really wanting to work together on a number of pieces of legislation that you've brought up so far, point access blocks, missing middle, but also a few things around parking reform, allowing multifamily housing in commercial zones, transit-oriented development. So we've got a handful of ideas that I think have traction. One, because, the legislature got a lot done last year.
Yeah.
They kind of ticked all the boxes. And so now they have room and appetite for this issue that has kind of been bubbling up. And I think partially 2040 has been adding to that discussion, but also just housing affordability has been a major thing. But the other interesting piece is that this isn't a budget year at the legislature. It's not a year to go get a bunch of funding. It's a year more for policy. And so I think this is another good reason why talking about land use reform is really pertinent in 2024.
Is anybody pursuing land value taxes?
Common Grounds is pursuing that. The Neighbors for More Neighbors members were sort of interested in supporting that. It is a somewhat specialist area. You could pass a lot of really useful land use reform statewide, plexes, heavy, greater density around light rail and bus rapid transit. And the land value tax could be, totally separate from that. But I do think that it's important to understand, why Neighbors for More Neighbors members were really enthusiastic about it. Is that if you're going to sort of do this general upzoning, increasing the amount of what you can do on a piece of land, it raises the economic effect is it raises the value of land. And so you can allow the public to sort of capture some of that back by having a land value tax. This is it sort of ties things together in a really nice way by giving some public benefit to these policies.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to do it. I think that I see the sort of the theoretical arguments for it, but it's not going to sort of save the world. But it's another useful tool for cities to have. And so they're pursuing that. I think the notion is that maybe the bill that their Common Grounds is proposing is that Minneapolis and St. Paul would be able to do a pilot.
Hmm.
Typically, I think in other jurisdictions, what has happened is you don't move from your current system to a full-on land value tax. You introduce a sort of a split rate where initially some of the levy is based on the land value, and maybe over time you sort of gradually move towards a full land value rating. But those are all sort of details to be worked out. And I think that's probably what they mean by a pilot. So
Gotcha. Nice. The summer camps that Neighbors for More Neighbors hosted last summer, there were two goals to them, right? There was the developing what our legislative agenda was going to be, and that was a conversation that carried forward. But then there was also like developing the skills that the team was going to need in order to interface with the statewide legislative system, because that was, not everybody, not all of the volunteers have experience with talking with their legislators and, building that kind of coalition. So how can people like plug into the efforts that Neighbors for More Neighbors and the broader coalition is doing? Like what are the asks that you guys have for listeners?
Yeah, so we've got a very active task force. We're looking for volunteers. Any amount of time that people would want to contribute and do a little volunteering to help out is really, really welcome. No matter how small or large the amount of time people have. There's a group of about a dozen or more. We meet regularly to coordinate other people who can't make that meeting, and then of course we've got this wider coalition. As the legislative session ramps up, there's going to be a sort of a greater call on everyone's time in a lot of different areas to do research, to answer legislators' questions, to attend committee hearings, and interface with other groups outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul as well. That's one of the things which is going to be particularly important, is sort of activating the networks that people have across Minnesota, so that legislators in suburban districts and greater Minnesota as well know that this is a really important issue and can call their legislator and tell them to support the good bills that are in development.
Anything else that people need to know about before we sign off?
We haven't even touched on the fact that Minnesota will lose a congressional seat if we don't keep our population growth up. And so allowing people to move here and actually have a home is good. And I think, that's something we could pay more attention to.
I like how you're already looking towards like 2031 when that would be the case. But I think that's a really important point. I'll also just say, like, for anyone who's just like interested in this topic, we're a volunteer group. Some folks are kind of just new to the space and they just sit in on the call, and after attending for a couple months, then they'll raise their hand to sign up for a task. But I think it's also just a really important session for us to build capacity as people who care about all the values that I mentioned before, to learn how to engage and how the sausage gets made, so that this is just step one of our land use reform. We can hope that we'll get everything passed, but we also know that anything that gets passed will probably not be perfect, and there will be things still left on the table. And so making sure that we're continuing to build that capacity is going to be really important. So really welcome anyone who's interested to come join us.
And also, we want to make sure that we're not leaving more on the table this year than we have to, because who knows what the next election cycle is going to bring. These are the two, like last year and this year are the 2 years where we're guaranteed, we know that we have a DFL trifecta, and we can really get a lot of stuff going through. Mm-hmm. Who knows how long it'll be before the next one comes around.
And that's another reason to make sure you go door knock this fall.
Indeed.
Make sure we keep the DFL trifecta out to suburbs to door knock, and it matters.
Yep. All right. Katie, Yvonne, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Before we hear about transportation, let's take a little break in the parklet. Listener Meredith recently emailed us with a recommendation for another podcast episode that the Streets.mn community might be interested in. It's from a show out of Vermont called Rumble Strip. They don't always cover transportation topics, but this particular episode is about the approach to road maintenance in Vermont. Two things that struck me when I was listening to the episode. One, Vermonters spend a lot of time thinking and worrying about the mud season. And two, I am completely obsessed with the Vermont accent now. If you enjoyed our episode about pothole maintenance, I think you'll enjoy this one a lot as well. If you have recommendations for the rest of the Streets.mn audience, write into podcast@streets.mn. Streets.mn is a community blog and podcast and relies on contributions from audience members like you. If you can make a one-time or recurring donation, you can find more information about doing so at streets.mn/donate. And with that, let's get back to the 2024 legislative agenda. To talk about some more transportation-focused stuff now, we are going to chat with Cindy Winters, who is chair of the advocacy committee at the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. She prefers to call herself the boat rocker, which is hardcore. I love it. Very metal.
It's the fun part.
Yeah. Well, you have to have fun, you know, in this realm. Otherwise, you're going to go a little bit. So Cindy, yeah, let's chat about so Bike MN. We had a lot of wins just last year, and if listeners want to go and learn more about those, they can listen to our 2023 legislative wrap-up episode from last summer. So what have we got coming up here this year? Why don't you give us like a quick list, and then we'll like dive deeper into each one of those items.
Okay. So this is all still very fluid. We're still working on this, but these are the topics that we want to introduce at the legislature. So we're looking at decriminalizing jaywalking. We want to strengthen the complete streets policy, really addressing the state aid standards that occur at the local level that prevent some of the best practices for active transportation being implemented. We're strengthening the e-bike language. We'd like to introduce 15 miles an hour speed zones in schools, all schools. We want to add bicycle and walking safety standards to the driver's education standard. We had talked about eliminating right on red. We can talk about that a little bit more. We have it may not be a legislative introduction, but done through another means.
Okay.
And then I also want to make sure that we talk about the day on the hill.
Absolutely.
Coming up.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So diving into some of those things, I think let's do schooled speed limits first, because that was something that I vaguely remember from last year.
Right. The thought was that we were going to try and give counties the ability to lower speed limits. In 19, the city-owned streets were able to lower their speed limits, and then we wanted to address counties. That was taken out of the bill last year.
Okay.
And so we're specifically looking at school zones. We'd like to do a 15 mile an hour speed limit within school zones at all schools.
Kind of like, and that's regardless of whether that's a city, county, or I don't know.
Correct.
Are we going all the way up to state highways? Like,
we would really like to. We'll see. We'll see what happens. You know, it's all a process. It's who's at the table, and compromises are always made.
Right.
Sometimes compromises are good because you end up with a better bill, and sometimes you have to take what you can get.
Yeah. And I mean, in this case, it's like we have so many places where things like a U.S. Highway 61 is, you know, a designated like U.S. highway, but really It's Arcade Street, and it goes straight through the east side of St. Paul, and like it goes right by a bunch of schools.
Right.
Which is
right.
like, yeah. And really like we have to do some soul searching there about like, okay, like what is a highway at this point, right? Like,
Correct. Right. And what's the function of a highway? And does it need to function as a highway within city limits? It should function in my opinion, function as a highway outside of city limits and should be a residential street within city limits.
right.
And allow residents to be able to use that space the way they see fit.
Yeah. Like,
and can cross.
Yeah, and I mean anywhere that like pedestrians are legally allowed, it should be safe, especially when it's near a school. Like, yeah,
right, yep, yeah. And every Safe Routes to School parent survey that I've read, one of the top reasons that parents don't let their kids walk to school is the speed of traffic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and we know that as speeds increase, the survivability rate for children decreases. And it's only going to get worse with our larger, heavier vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a whole other like legislative prong.
Right. Yeah. And that's probably needs to come from the feds.
Yeah. In terms of, safety features in cars, usually the states don't do that.
Yeah. They're less likely to do that. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of pedestrians, speaking of walking, tell me about jaywalking.
So we want to decriminalize it.
Mm-hmm.
It's an equity issue. And right now, if you are jaywalking, you can be ticketed, and it's considered a petty misdemeanor, and you can be fined for it.
Okay.
And in some places across the country, it has been used as a pretextual stop to look for other offenses.
Mm-hmm.
And so individuals, low income, unhoused, people of color have historically been targeted with jaywalking. And we just want to decriminalize it and not make it a reason to be stopped.
Yeah. And it seems to me like very in line with like last year we decriminalized fare evasion on like Metro Transit, right?
Right.
Yes. And that was, because those were, so now it's an administrative citation. So what's the, like, if we succeed with the jaywalking legislature there, like what would it become? What would be the consequences of jaywalking? Or
so you wouldn't get a ticket. Mm-hmm. You still, as a pedestrian, have to be smart about crossing the street. You can't intentionally walk in front of a vehicle. Mm-hmm. So it would pretty much
like the right of way priority doesn't change.
Right.
If you're crossing in a crosswalk, you have, as a pedestrian, you have right of way. But if you're crossing mid block, you do not.
Right. Correct.
And that would mostly that would come into play not because like a police person is stopping you, but because like if you get hit, then like, in the courts, liability.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Because it's on the books. That's something that's really, really hard to take off because of how we've kind of set up our system to support it behind the issue. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's always fun to find out about these like little quirks of like, oh, because of the way that this law was set up or the venue that it went through, it.
Yeah, there's unintended consequences that make it more difficult to change.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those in transportation.
Yep. Kind of like parking minimums, right? Which is another like parallel, but we talked about that during the land use portion of the episode.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's something that Bike MN, we're supporting all of those initiatives as well. Mm-hmm. So we're supporting those that are being put forth to increase transit and parking minimums, increase density around transit, all of those. those land use policies that ultimately affect how our streets are used or could be used for active transportation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. How about right turns on red? Cindy, why are those a problem? That's just a totally normal thing that everybody gets to do, right?
Right. And there was really no science behind actually implementing it, but trying to get it off the books is challenging because people really like their right on red. And
So
it wouldn't be
I
a
suppose
problem.
we should probably give like the quick Reader's Digest version of like why the law exists. So this dates back to the oil crisis of the 1970s, right? And the thinking, the way that the law was presented and pitched was, oh, you're spending so much time idling at red lights. You're wasting all this gas. Gas is too expensive. Let's let people turn right.
Right. Yes.
And
if it's free to go, if there's no one coming, then then you can turn right. And you're no longer idling, you're no longer wasting gas.
Mm-hmm.
That was the thought, but it never panned out. That's not actually the case. And the way cars are built today, when you're stopped, you're not burning gas.
Right. Yeah, they turn their engines off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you're in an electric car, like it's just not using any energy whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. And it's dangerous for the pedestrians because if you just stand at a corner and watch cars, they don't even really come to a full stop a lot of times anymore.
Right.
Or when they do, they're not looking for the pedestrian at all. And if you've got the crosswalk and the person turning right has the red, chances are they may not see you. And with the larger cars that we already talked about, there's bigger blind spots. So they might not even see you standing at the corner when you have the right of way and you can take the turn.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we would like to eliminate right on red. The thought is that in the smaller communities that there would be some pushback. So it's been recommended to us that we take that to the Traffic Safety Council that was created in last year's legislation.
Okay. The one that Bike MN has a seat at the table?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. Because that's a bipartisan council. And if that could be a recommendation from that council to the commissioner, we would have a better chance of it being adopted.
Right. Yeah. And like that's the infuriating thing about like right turns on red is that like in a perfect world, that law shouldn't be a problem. Right? Like it doesn't actually make any dangerous activities legal. But as we know from our, systems thinking training, the result of a system, right? The outcome of a system is the function of the system. So no matter what your intention was, like, hey, you've passed this law that is resulting in like people are encouraged when they are in a car and they want to turn red, like they are just going to look to their left to see where is the danger that's coming towards me. And people don't look to the right to see how am I creating danger for other people. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there was a study done in Canada where they put cameras in the car to watch the driver's eye movements to see where they were looking when they came to a light. And the majority look to the left and they don't look to the right to see who or what they may be turning into.
Right. Yeah. And it's especially like it's especially dangerous in places like the Bruce Venno Trail through the east side of St. Paul, where it is a two-way trail on one side of a street, and that street is mostly T-junctions with other streets. And so all of the streets that are approaching it, at the T-junction, like there's bicyclists going both directions at, like when that was my daily commute, like I'm cooking, right?
Right.
Because I'm on a trail. I have nothing to worry about except for when you come to somebody else has a red light and they're not looking for you. And I've gotten right hooked multiple times there.
Yeah, very, very dangerous.
Yeah. And even like, I'm sure people will make the argument that like, oh, well, anytime that there's heavy pedestrian traffic or it's going to be like, dangerous, like a two-way path, like just put up a sign that says no right on red.
Right.
But nobody sees those signs.
Right. And and there's just such a lack of consistency across the system as a whole
Mm-hmm.
that it's another, I know we're supposed to pay attention to traffic signals, but it becomes another distraction within the car. And we
Absolutely.
talk about distracted driving all the time.
Yeah. There's too many signs out there to be reading while you're like in a moving vehicle already.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're in an area that you're not familiar with.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it'd be nice if it was consistent across the board.
Yeah. If the default is you can't do this thing and nobody expects to be able to do that thing, then like every once in a while, if you you're out in the middle of nowhere and there's no pedestrian traffic and like the engineers who built the road put in a slip lane for you, then like, oh, it's a pleasant surprise, right?
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. How about driver's ed standards?
So there are not any particular standards on walking and biking safety, and it's kind of all over the board. And we would like to create specific standards on what topic is covered, really very similar to what we did for when we included walking and biking standards within the schools as a part of their bus safety. We want to incorporate that within driver's education as well.
So when you say along the same lines as what we give them in the schools, I imagine that you don't literally mean like, oh, we're going to give them the same lessons as we give to the elementary school students.
But, specific topics, and we don't want to add to the amount of time that driver's education takes, because I think it's at 30 hours. But how can you incorporate more bicycle and walking education within driver's education? Because if you get it during driver's ed, you're more like, it's more of a lifetime skill that you develop and create more respect for walkers and bikers. But if you don't get it in driver's ed, and because there's not specific standards around it, some driver's education provides it and some don't.
Right. Yeah. One specific little thing that I really hope that more people can be taught is just like the simple trick of like, oh, if you're on the driver's side of the car and you're going to open your door, use your right arm to open the door instead of your left arm, because that turns your body so that you're like naturally looking to see if there's anybody, specifically any cyclists in the bike lane, Correct.
Yes. Isn't that called the Dutch?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the full term, but it comes from the Dutch. Yeah, which is, I wish I would remember that when I'm driving. But I come from a one car family, so I bike most of the way, most of the time, and I don't usually park on the street. I'm parking in the parking lot. So
yeah, but it's a similar kind of thing where it's like, oh, like nobody expects there to be a cyclist passing by when you're in a parked car, the same way that nobody expects there to be a pedestrian to their right when they're about to make a right turn.
Right. Right. And I think if we're successful as active transportation advocates, we're going to start seeing more and more. So then that there's more expectation, there's more people biking and walking. So we become to expect it.
Right. Yeah.
And you look for it more.
Yeah.
But
you need that virtuous cycle, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's why we're here.
Yeah. Let's see. State aid standards.
I'm not familiar with all the state aid standards. I know that there are some that just make it more difficult in urbanized areas to make changes to the street for active transportation purposes, like the width of the lanes.
Yeah. And let's talk about that mechanism for a moment, because state aid is something that like most people never ever have to think about.
Right. And they don't know which roads are state aid.
Right. Yeah. So what this is it's anytime that like a city or a county has a street or a road that they want the state to kick in some funds to help with to help with upkeep, to help with whatever, maintenance of the road.
Correct.
Then the state, like Minnesota, has a definition of like you must build this road to meet these standards, and they are more stringent than if you did not ask for that money.
Right. And the city doesn't have the flexibility that they do on the roads that they own.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, so like what things are problematic about, like what aspects of those standards are we looking to loosen?
So that I can't really tell you because I haven't been involved in those conversations. I just know that it has come up. And I know when I was working in the small rural community that I worked in, we wanted to decrease lane width because we know that narrower lanes slow traffic because you can create more friction along the street. So people naturally just drive slower.
Right.
And if it's a state aid road, you cannot do that. You have to stay at a certain standard, which tend to be larger than the minimum that the MUTCD guidelines.
Okay. And the MUTCD is
The
inherited
Manual
from
for
the
Uniform Traffic Control Devices
and
from that.
that comes from the federal level.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so those, yeah, and you said that we're approaching that from the complete streets policy side.
Correct. So we're trying to strengthen the complete streets policy so that, in the current language, I believe the word shall is used a lot. And what does shall mean?
Sure.
So we're trying to strengthen it to say you must incorporate the complete streets guidelines, and the complete streets policy was updated recently, and it's better than what it was, but not all districts apply it the same across the board.
Yeah. Okay. And so when we say policy, does that mean that like it's not a law that the legislature passed? Is it like MnDOT staff put forth this policy and it got adopted by some entity? Like,
I don't know the history of it because I did not live in Minnesota at the time, and it's been around for quite a while. I think it came about in Tim Pawlenty's administration.
Okay.
So it's been around for a long time, and I'm not sure if MnDOT put forth the policy or if it did come from the state legislature.
So at this point right now, who are we approaching in order to change the complete streets policy?
So we're doing it through the legislation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, because I mean, they get to override anything that any departments do.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's their purview.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then let's see what else we had. Oh, e-bike classifications.
Yeah, there's there's some misconceptions and misinformation around e-bikes, and there are some what I'll call renegade e-bikes out there where people override some of the mechanics of an e-bike so that they actually kind of turn them into mopeds,
right?
So that they go faster.
Or just like straight up conversion kits where they take like an acoustic bike and put some motors on it, and then like who even knows what that thing is capable of. Right. And we had heard that there may have been potentially a bill put forth to call all e-bikes a motor vehicle, and then that would require a license. And it's like, so then now you're taking away a very valuable form of transportation for a variety of individuals. Right. Yeah.
And so we want to strengthen the language around what is and is not considered an e-bike, so that we don't fall into that trap of, okay, now it's a motor vehicle and now we all have to have a license to ride.
Right.
Them.
That would be the worst outcome.
Absolutely, yes.
Because I mean, there's a lot of people out there who, like, for one reason or another, they cannot legally get a driver's license, and so biking is an essential avenue for them to be able to get around in their community.
Right. And e-bikes, you can go farther on an e-bike than you could on an acoustic bike. Older adults like e-bikes because they tend to ride more often and they ride farther. And when we think about cargo bikes, e-bikes, and shifting how we deliver things, cargo bikes are becoming a huge piece of our infrastructure, which helps to take some of our gas burning vehicles off the road.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
Can you get specific about what the classifications are that we're trying to put into place here?
So we want to add a classification that describes what a power cycle is. So it's more, it goes more along the line of what a moped is. So it separates the classifications from an e-bike from a motorized bike.
And is that based on like maximum speed, or is that based on like pedal assist or versus throttle, or like,
So the current classification for e-bikes is there's 3 different classes. Class 1 is an e-bike that are pedal assist only, and they don't have a throttle, and they have a maximum assisted speed up to 20 miles an hour, and then the motor cuts out. A class 2 e-bike has a maximum speed of 20 miles an hour, but they are throttle assisted. And a class 3 e-bike are pedal assist only with no throttle, and they have a maximum assist speed of 28 miles an hour. So you could potentially have like a class 3 bike that has a throttle on it that gets you up to 28 miles an hour. Well, that's gonna not be considered a class 3 because it has a throttle. So now it's a class of its own, is what we're proposing.
And so currently, we don't have a classification for that currently.
No, we do not.
Okay.
And that's where some of the miscommunication and misconcept comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also, because there's the online sales of the kits and things like that, there's some misinformation around advertising for those, and we're trying to prevent that from happening as well.
Mm-hmm. What are those classifications currently used for? Like, are there certain trails where they are or not allowed, or like what effect do they have?
Right now, wherever a bike, an acoustic bike is allowed, e-bikes are allowed unless posted, and it's up to the owner of the trail to determine what's allowed on the trail and what's not. Some trails have speed limits on them.
Mm-hmm.
Most trails are like 10 miles an hour, which you can go more than 10 miles an hour easily on an acoustic bike.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
and I mean, frankly, that rule is unenforceable if somebody's on an acoustic bike, because like I don't have a speedometer on my acoustic bike.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you cannot argue that I was knowingly going faster than the speed limit, because like I don't
I don't know how fast I'm going.
Like scooters where you're just standing on a platform and you've got the handlebars at the top of the stick, right? Like a Lime scooter or spin or whatever. Like, are those, because those have a throttle, they don't have pedal assist, but they max out at probably 20 miles an hour. I don't
know that there's actually a classification to them, because they can be managed through their software. Yeah. So whoever owns I guess I'm talking about the scooter share programs.
Right.
Whoever owns it can geo-fence them and can set their speeds.
Yes.
So you can't override them.
Yeah.
But the personally owned ones, I don't know that much about the personal scooters and their limitations. And I'm sure, you could override any of their functions.
Sure. Yeah. But that's the case with e-bikes as well, right? Like if I am good enough with software, like I could change anything. So I'm just trying to figure out like whether or not electric scooters are just like a completely, like, do they follow completely separate laws, or are they at the state level allowed everywhere that an acoustic bike is? And my instinct says they probably are.
I think it depends on the community.
Okay.
Just because they tend to get left in just really odd places.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like here in Mankato, they're allowed in a certain area within campus, and that's the only part of the city that they'll function in as far as like the bike, as the scooter share program.
Yeah. That's a separate issue though. Than the safety considerations of like, are we going to allow them to be operated in, should they use a bike lane or should they use the sidewalk? Right. Is it,
Right. And I don't think I think we will end up facing that in the future as they become more popular. Right now, there isn't that many, at least in my area, that the city has decided, oh, we really need to look at this as a whole and how we're going to manage this.
The other aspect that we might have to grapple with in the future is like classifying them based off of their mass. Because, if a person who's on like one of those like one wheel platforms, right? If they run into me at 20 miles an hour, okay, well, that's actually an even softer landing than like somebody hitting me on a bike at 20 miles an hour. But if somebody is on like a moped and they're going 20 miles an hour, then that's a whole different story. Like that is a larger machine and that hurts more.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So.
And I'm sure those are issues that we will end up addressing down the road.
Yep. But for now, for this year, we're focusing on just the e-bikes that have pedal assist and also have throttles and can go up to 28 miles an hour.
Correct.
Which currently are in limbo.
Right. I mean, there's just some thoughts that they just shouldn't be allowed, and you're just that's such a short-sighted view. Right. When they are such a valuable tool. And e-bikes are selling so much faster and at a rate that outpaces electric vehicles.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I can go 28 miles an hour on an acoustic bike. Like,
right, absolutely. I could not, but yeah.
So the question becomes like, oh, am I too much of a danger to society to be allowed to do that, and how do you prevent that? And you
can start taking me off the trails now too.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Cindy, any other stuff that we haven't talked about yet? That's everything that was on my notes.
Other than our day on the hill, our bike walk summit is scheduled for Thursday, March the 14th at the Christ Lutheran Church on University Avenue in St. Paul. We will, in the morning, we'll have a set of speakers, and then in the afternoon, we will make appointments for you to go talk to your local rep to help support the laws and changes that we are proposing to improve walking and biking for everyone in Minnesota. And we really, really need people from outstate Minnesota, from greater Minnesota to attend. And if you can't attend, if you would at least write a letter and address it to your representative, but send it to Bike MN, we'll hand deliver those to your representative so that you still have a voice on that day, because it's so important to hear from people across the entire state.
We want to get so many letters that it's like the scene from Miracle on 34th Street.
Right, yeah. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, and lunch is provided during the summit day, right?
Yeah. Correct, yes. And we're still planning our after session activities, and we're not quite sure what. Yeah. To be determined.
Oh, and that is the other great thing, is like getting to sit and chat and, like collaborate with other bike advocates from across the state.
Correct. Right. Yeah. And during the times when you're not visiting your rep in the afternoon, we will have some roundtable discussions and opportunities to network across the state as well.
Awesome. Cindy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah. It's an exciting legislative season for us this year.
Exactly. And let's just keep the streak going, okay?
Yeah. All right. Talk to you later.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Streets.mn podcast. The show is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Non-Derivative license, so feel free to republish the episode as long as you're not altering it and you are not profiting from it. The music in this episode is by Eric Brandt and the Urban Hillbilly Quartet. This episode was hosted, edited, and transcribed by me, Ian R. Buck. We're always looking to feature new voices on the Streets.mn podcast, so if you have ideas for future episodes, drop us a line at podcast@streets.mn. Find other listeners and discuss this episode on your favorite social media platform using the hashtag StreetsMNPodcast. Until next time, take care.